And we're recording. So really excited to welcome Tim Freke onto this Heart of Thriving Zoom call. He's a pioneering philosopher, best-selling books, inspirational talks, life-changing retreats, have touched the hearts and minds of hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. He's the author of 35 books, and in his latest books, Deep Awake and Soul Story, both of which I highly recommend, Tim offers a revolutionary approach to awakening for the 21st century and a visionary new understanding of the nature of reality. I met Tim not that long ago, actually, when Ross and I spent 3 days on a retreat with him in May and learned loads, which is why I wanted to bring him on to as one of these Zoom calls, particularly because, as you know, I'm all about the thriving, and it seems to me Tim's really has something very special to add to that whole conversation. So once again, if you could keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. And I'm going to start, Tim, if it's all right, by just asking you if you could share with us, what do you mean by deep awake?
Okay. Well, firstly, it's a real privilege to speak to you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this group. Yeah, deep awake is a good place to start. So it seems to me that a lot of the time we go through life in a normal waking state, which is semi-conscious. We're living in our conditioning. We don't see what's in front of us. And one of the most telltale signs of that, which amuses me all the time, is that we don't see the profound mystery of existence, which is all around us. So a telltale sign for me that I've fallen asleep into life is when I think I know what's going on, because actually it only takes a moment for me to recognize that I really don't, and that I'm in the middle of something so extraordinary. Just the size of the universe, the mystery of existing at all, the journey between life and death, the scale of what I experience, both in its hugeness and in its minute detail. I don't know what this is. There's this sensations and thoughts and feelings, but it is profoundly mysterious. And what that opens up for me is a shift, like a waking up. And if I go into that enough, and that's really been what I've been specializing in for the last, 50 years or more now, since I was stumbled into this deep awake state for the first time when I was 12, is a shift in consciousness. And the qualities that mark it out for me, although I think it can be different for different people, is that there's a profound sense of communion or oneness with the whole of existence. And that oneness isn't an abstract thing, it's a felt thing as well. And the feeling, which is central for me to the whole thing, is of connection and love. That there's a profound sense of this overwhelming, limitless love, which is holding the whole thing together. So having stumbled into that when I was very young, and being very moved by the experience, what I've spent a lot of time doing ever since is wondering what it is, how I can get back there, how I can share it with others, and what it means. And that's why I've ended up writing all these books on all these different spiritual traditions, going, hang on a second. These are human beings like you and me who have had this same experience. And although they're writing about it from a different philosophical position, and there are different cultures and different times, fundamentally, there's a commonality to the experience. And the commonality comes around the fundamental oneness and love or compassion or agape or metta, or whatever word that they use, but they're pointing to this, oh my God, we are being held in this huge love. So my primary interest is to explore that myself and share it with others. And that's what I've been doing in retreats, in my books, and all the rest of it. But also, I'm a philosopher, and I feel that understanding also matters. And what I've ended up with is looking for a way of thinking which can help this open up. And what I found particularly useful is something I call paralogical thinking. And paralogical thinking is a word I made up. I make up a lot of words because the words I'm looking for don't exist. So you'll have to bear with me, but I think they'll be useful. They take on a life of their own. Is a shorthand way of understanding that it's both and thinking rather than either or thinking. Because for most purposes, either or thinking is fine. But if you want to look into the depths of things, there's a fundamental paradox to the nature of reality. It's captured beautifully, actually, in that very beautiful ancient symbol of the yin-yang symbol, where you get the coexistence of opposites together and they're turning into each other. And that seems to point to something very deep about the nature of reality. And that's an example of paralogical thinking. Now, an example which is very useful with regard to this awakening is to understand that when I say there's an experience of waking up to oneness, that it's not instead of separateness, but as well. And that's key for me, because what I came across when I was searching out a way to go deeper and to understand this was that it was one or the other. And that there was fundamentally something which is in the way. And what was in the way was Tim. I was in the way. My individuality, my ego, this ego just means I. It's Latin, but it's this, that Tim is in the way. And the message I was getting was even stronger than that. The message I was getting at that time in the 70s and 80s was that there was a part of me, this ego or whatever name you gave it, the self, that was actively stopping me. It wanted to stop me because it knew that if I woke up to oneness, it would die. And that my job was to kill it. Now, who I was to kill this other part of me, I don't really know. It didn't really make much sense. But because people with exotic sounding names and seemed to be well respected by a lot of people around them were saying it, I was prone to believe it. What I've been doing since is developing an approach to awakening which says the complete opposite of that. I am not at all convinced that there is anything inside of us which wants us to not awaken. I do think that everyone is a work in progress. I certainly am. So that there's plenty that I could look at myself and be critical of. And I suspect that will always be true, because the older I get, the more I see, the more I grow, the more I can see, and that's a constant process of growing and seeing things about myself. But that doesn't mean that there's something pernicious about Tim. It just means that the nature of life is evolutionary, and Tim's evolving. So the first both and I'd like to share with you is that the type approach to this deep awakening which interests me is to say, look, it's not either my separate identity or this profound oneness that unites everything. Actually, not only do they go together, I think they have to go together, which is why, having hung out with a lot of so-called enlightened people, they've all turned out to be very, very human and flawed, just like me. So that I've completely abandoned this. Actually, it's an Indian idea. It's just part of Indian culture. It's not in all mystical traditions, that there's an ultimate enlightenment whereby you leave everything behind and your separateness is gone. In fact, what I've come to feel myself is that actually the individual self is the vehicle through which we wake up, and that this whole process of the universe has been to create the individual self. So rather than being in the way, it's the whole work of creation, and we need to completely flip that around. And that's what this paralogical thinking can do. Now, I run these events, which a few of you here, a couple of I know at least, have been to. And I think the reason that I'm able to share this deep awake state pretty much with most people in such a way that they get the big love, so you feel it. So it's not just like, oh, yes, and there is an understanding, but it's a felt experience, is because the first step for me is like, don't try and fight your separate self. Just let it be. And then find this as well, not instead. Find the oneness as well, because it's right there. It's always there, because it's our deepest nature. And what you find in the great mystical traditions of the world is this profound idea that your deepest self, your being, is the thing which is experiencing this moment right now. And the thing which is experiencing this moment has no form to it. It just is. It is pure being. Because everything you are experiencing is a form. Something you see, something you think, something you listen to. It's a sensation or an image. But the thing which is experiencing all of that is not a sensation or an image. It is being itself, which we experience because we're conscious as consciousness. And therefore, what happens is we get caught up in the experience because it's very, very interesting and wonderful. But at a certain point, as well, not instead, we can reflect on our being. So you're putting your attention back onto what's always there, the presence of the I. And if you sink back into that deeply enough, there's this vast, spacious oneness, which holds everything within it. And what then arises in the individual is connectivity. And connectivity feels like love, which is why when you love someone, it's because you feel profoundly connected and you're not separate. You're separate and not separate, both. And that's the big love.
Fabulous. Thanks, Tim. And I think that leads us really nicely onto what you wrote about in Soul Story, this kind of your ideas, your theory, if I can call it that, of emergent spirituality, rather than something that's always been there and it's just our job to find it.
Yeah, and I think that's right. When I talk about the deep awake state, I'm trying to describe something I'm experiencing and which I can share from experience. Then there's the whole cosmic game that we're in, this whole huge adventure. And that's something which we can at best speculate about because it's very mysterious. However, it feels we do need a story. We need a story individually. If you don't think you've got one, you're fooling yourself. You have one. It may be half-baked. It may be cobbled together. It may be just come from our culture. Most people's are like that. I expect this group is not like that, but most people's are. So it's a good thing to question it and doubt our story, that what we think this is that's happening to us. And of course, we're heading, we have a life. Does it have purpose? We are heading towards death. Is that the end? These are profound questions which affect how you live. So it feels to me, once we've registered the mystery, we can then can look deeply into life and give it our best guess and share that with each other. So what I'm doing with my philosophy in Soul Story is to try and develop a philosophy which is adequate for me, because I'm quite demanding and no philosophy that I can find is adequate. So I've had to work on one. So I'll share with you, it's a big story. So I'm going to just share with you some principles of it. And then maybe when we do questions, we can go in a direction which you want to go with it. So the first thing I'm going to invite you to do is just be in the mystery with me for a moment, because I'm going to say things which will probably be different to how you see things. They may not, but they might be. But just to consider it. So the first thing I want to do is just look at the moment. When I look at the moment, which is where I start and finish as a philosopher, what I see is that there is a process happening which you can call time. There's a stream of events happening, experiences, and that's always there. So something is fundamental about the nature of time, because all experience requires time. Without, experience is time. And when I look at that, I see that the moment has this quality, this changing moment has a quality whereby it's continually new. It's always realizing a new possibility. That's the first thing I see. So every moment is realizing a new possibility. That's what it is. Oh, and there's new, and that's new. And then I notice something else about it, about the nature of time, which is that the moment contains within it implicitly all of the past. Now, in English, we have this metaphor, which I think is very misleading about time, where we think of time as passing. So a lot of us feel like, we've lost it all. It's all gone. And we're just marooned in this moment, heading towards we don't know where. I've lost all of that. It was all, the rest of your life and all that stuff. It's just vague memories. I'm not at all sure that's true. Because it seems to me that everything that has ever happened is implicit in this moment, so that the past hasn't passed. Actually, the metaphor I would like to offer you to experiment with is that actually what has happened is the past has accumulated. There's more of it. There's more now than when we started doing this session. And everything that's ever been is implicit in this moment. So your decision to switch on the computer is implicit in this moment. Learning language, getting interested in this, meeting each other, getting born, your parents getting born, the human race evolving, the galaxies coming into existence, everything is implicit in this moment. And if anything were different, it would not be this moment. So it feels that we can say something about the universe here, which is interesting, which is that the universe is a process, it seems to me, of time, a flow of time through which new things are continually being realized. And through the accumulation of time of the past, it's becoming richer and richer and richer and richer and richer. So that's one principle I'd like to share with you about time. Here's the second. We need something, I think, which can unite science and spirituality. And what I call emergent spirituality is my attempt to do that. But it does require both to change. So the hypothesis I'll put before you in its simplest form, this is the essential idea which I'm playing with, which is, okay, so if this moment is the realization of new possibilities, in which it builds on the past but becomes something new, builds on the past and becomes something new, the meeting of the past and the possible in the present. Is that what the whole universe is? So that we can recast this idea we get in science of the evolution, which is so powerful. And we can go, okay, so what science is telling us is that for 13.8 billion years, since what they call the Big Bang, the first moment in this universe, what we've seen is a flow of the realization of possibilities. And time is accumulated because the universe is a process, not a thing. And processes are made of time. So the process started off 13.8 billion years ago, and through the accumulation of time, becomes more and more complicated, which means there's a tendency to evolution. Building on the past, there's a tendency towards emergence. And this is a key word in science at the moment, which is very simple. It's the idea that new things keep happening, but not just like a new moment, but radical new things. Like there once was pretty much just hydrogen. Now, a friend of mine, Brian Swim, who's a marvelous evolutionary scientist, he put it like this to me, which I love. He said, yes, what we've learned is if you take hydrogen and you wait long enough, it learns to sing opera. Isn't that beautiful? That's what we've learned. And that's emergence. So what you see first is the emergence of the physical universe, and everything builds on what's been before. So once you've got hydrogen and oxygen, you can have the emergence of water, H2O, but you can't have it before. And it's building, 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 and we get 10 billion years of the evolution of the physical universe. And that creates the ground where, in our planet, maybe others, but on ours we know, that you see the first single-cell organism. Once you've got a single-celled organism, you can have multi-cell organisms. Now you can have plants. Now you can start having animals. So that the last 3 billion years, we've seen the evolution of the variety of the biological sphere. At some point in that process, you saw the emergence of sensation, this experience we're having of looking and listening of the world around us. At some point after that, you got the emergence of something utterly remarkable. You got the emergence of psyche. This world you're experiencing right now of imagination. A world which isn't made of things. It's made of images, ideas. And it doesn't exist in space, does it? Where is it? Nowhere. And yet we're communicating in it right now. The place In the world of biology, there's a monkey making funny noises. But in the world of psyche, you can hear meaning. There's no meaning in the funny noises. All of the meaning is in the imagination, in the psyche. That has evolved. Now, the word psyche is the Greek word for soul. That's what it means. It means soul. All of these words, soul, mind, imagination, they're all words for this non-material dimension. So what I'd like to suggest to you is that there's a principle, which is that what we've seen is the emergence and the realization of ever greater potentials. So as a hypothesis, how about this? Everything which has form has evolved. Everything. Because this moment seems to be that process. So what if everything that has form has evolved? Now this challenges spirituality. Because spirituality, most spiritual traditions think there is something before this. So that there's a soul dimension, a heavenly dimension, the bardos, the spirit world, God, all of that, which has pre-existed and which we've fallen from. So the fundamental spiritual myth is I call it the fuck up idea. That fundamentally life is a fuck up. There's been some great error, you've fallen away from this great place and you need to go home, or God has fallen into an illusion and has got confused, and it was all better before, and if you can just get away from this, hence the Tim's in the way. He's the problem, get rid of Tim, get rid of you, you can get back to being God, and it'll all be okay. It's fundamentally very negative, which is why it's had a real down on the body, of pleasure, everything you enjoy, basically. It's a bad thing. Now, what I love about the evolutionary view is very positive, very optimistic, because it goes, no, it's reaching towards something better. It's reaching towards a more realized potential all the time. So I'm making a very simple suggestion as an hypothesis, just to see how it works. I think it's working pretty well so far, which is this, that soul dimension wasn't always there, but everything has evolved. So that as we went through 10 billion years of physical evolution, 3 billion years of biological evolution, and in this piece at the end, we've seen the evolution of psyche, not just as a byproduct of a piece of meat, which is what science says, but actually, as we experience it, as a whole domain of reality. A domain in reality in which we exist, and a domain in reality which brings with it a lot of other emergent phenomena. So, before there was biology, there was no life and death. That arose with biology. Before there was biology, there was no color, because there were no eyes. There was no sound, because there were no ears. Whole new emergent things arose with the evolution and the emergence of biology. What I'm suggesting is that with the evolution of psyche or soul, a whole lot of emergent phenomena came with it. One of which was the immortality of the soul, that it wasn't linked to the death of the body. One was meaning, that we can bring meaning into existence. And the other was story. Because what marks out the way that we deal with things in concepts is that we make stories. Now, the view in mainstream society at the moment that I want to challenge is that the psyche itself is just a kind of thing we don't really understand, a byproduct of the body. That I'm challenging. I'm saying, no, it's a whole domain. And not only is it a domain, it's the most emergent domain. And that what characterizes it is story, which is why we are stories. We're much more than bodies. We're stories. So there's Mick there, who I haven't seen for a while. There's an old friend. Our stories have been entwined for a long while. First thing I want to do is go, how's your story, Mick? And that's what we'll do. We share our stories, because that's what we are. Oh, it's going well, or it's going badly, or I'm a bit this or that. That's our stories. Now, what I want to suggest is those stories are not just extras, things we tell about it. They're actually an emergent level of reality. So I want to go further than my friend Brian Swim And I want to go, what we found is that if we take hydrogen and we wait long enough, it emerges as story. It emerges as a level of reality which is non-material. That the simple starts with simple matter, actually evolves into a thing which you're experiencing right now. There's nothing, you can check it out for yourself. It's clearly there, which is immaterial and which is defined by meaning and story. So those are some of the key principles, that everything is evolving and the more emergent is coming later. And I'll just add one last thought, and then I'll open it up and we can go wherever you want with it, which is to go back to the deep awake state. Because I think what is happening now is that something else is emerging. It's been emerging for a long time, but it's beginning to emerge much to many more people. So that spiritual awakening, far from being some sort of minor thing which of interest to a few people in the Himalayas, is actually the latest phase of the evolutionary process that started 13.8 billion years ago. And I'd just like to suggest a way of understanding it in this evolutionary context. So I've talked about everything is the realization of new possibilities. So what can we say about what was there before the Big Bang, if you like? Well, that doesn't make sense actually because it's before time, but what is it, if this is all the realization of something, we can say it's coming from, perhaps metaphysically, potentiality. That there is a potentiality, something which has no form because it's just potential, something which is not in time because time's going to arise from it, a timeless, formless potentiality. And one of the words the philosophers have given to that over the years is spirit or essence or being. So there's formless, timeless being, which is the potential for everything, becoming the universe, starting in the simplest forms, building on that into more complex forms, into organic forms, and then into soul, into this non-material realm in which we spend most of our time now, actually, the realm of the imagination. What I think is happening is that as we individuate, the whole process has been one of individuating, becoming more and more particular. And as it becomes more particular, as the time is accumulated, more conscious. So, you and I are much more particular than a hydrogen atom and much more conscious. As we do that, as soul individuates, it's possible that we can throw our attention back onto our very being. And when we do that, we discover that we are the source of the universe. What else could we be? So the source of the universe, being, is realizing itself as everything that is, and is experiencing itself as everything that is. And what spiritual awakening is when the individual soul, you and I, recognizes that, I am this individual evolving form, but my essential nature is this formless presence. And when you sense that, you realize, that's the essential nature of everything and everyone. And there's one of us arising as this vast multiplicity. And with that recognition of oneness, there comes this huge love and this deep knowing of the fundamental goodness of existence, because it's a process which is reaching ever towards the greatest good. And that's what I'm, in a very simple form, is what I'm putting forward as a philosophy I call emergent spirituality, which I think can bring science and spirituality together in a new form and give us a new narrative that can bring meaning to this incredible process that we're in.
Wow, thank you, Tim. Absolutely fascinating. So I'm relying on you guys to come up with some questions. If you have a question, I think I can just about see you all, actually. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll bring you on.
Have I silenced you all?
Yeah, Sarah.
Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Thank you for all of that. I can't help myself. If somebody says, is there a question? My hand goes up.
Good for you. I'm like that too. I do it to myself.
I wonder what your thoughts are. I work in mental health services, and in terms of emerging, and I really love the idea of there being a gathering of the past into the present moment, because that really rings true for me. And I've never thought about it in those terms before, and I've done mindfulness in the past, and there's been that sense of, well, this is the present moment, but everyone's present moment has still got elements of the past. And you put it incredibly eloquently, so thank you for that. But I wonder, going forward, what your thoughts are about the emergence of what seems to be more and more mental health difficulties within the population. And do we need to do anything with that, or is that something that is actually just a part of the process?
Both, I suspect. So let me start with mindfulness, because that's a really good example. It has been, and I think it's probably still is, very fashionable to dismiss time as an illusion, to go, look, all that exists is the now, and just get your attention in the now. It is such a superficial idea, because if you actually lived in the now, you wouldn't be wise, you'd be an amnesiac. If you hang around people who've got dementia, the problem is that they're in the now. Now, a lot of that's to do with memory, and I'm not talking about memory. You can forget the past, but it's still here. You can forget everything, and it's still here. So what I'm suggesting is that the moment's much richer than that. That the moment is a both and. It's the meeting of the past and the possible, and therefore it has this unique quality, which is that it both contains everything that's happened, and it's always new, and it's always new, and it's always new. But every moment always contains what's happened before. There's never been a moment that wasn't new, and there's never been a moment that didn't contain everything that happened before. That's its nature, that's its mystery. So that when we're mindful of the moment, we're mindful of that, which is extraordinary. And that means that right now, everything that I've ever been is meeting everything that Sarah has ever been. Now, that's the nature of the soul, because we exist on that level. And that world of imagination, of psyche, of soul, is full of a lot of stuff. And some of it is great, and some of it is very troubling. So I think we need to work with our soul. Let me just slightly divert, and then I'll come back to it, because when I was writing my book Soul Story, the original title I wanted to give it, the publishers made me change it for various reasons, was I wanted to call it Soul Formation, because I think what we are doing here is we are forming our nature as soul. That's what we're doing, and we're doing it all the time. You can't not do it, because we're the accumulation of everything we've ever been. So right now, I'm forming Tim, you're forming Sarah. Now the question is, because we are conscious, we can choose how we form it. Like, you made a choice to come to this. Other people didn't. You did. So did I. So we've chosen to make this part of who we are. And now we're inside each other forever because of that. So we can consciously form ourselves. Now, part of that is what gets called working on yourself, or it's like kind of looking at your soul. And one of the things which pushes us to do that is when there's problems. Now, I don't work in that area. I work with people generally, so I do meet a lot of people, of course. I myself have all sorts of things going on. I know people with mental illness, and how can you not these days? Whether there's more of it, I think it's hard to tell, because obviously we're more aware of it now. The world is moving at an increasing pace. I'm sure that's having an effect. And also, without wishing to belittle it in the slightest, because mental illness is a very difficult thing, obviously, we are also a generation, a whole culture, living at a level of affluence which would be unbelievable to just about everyone who's ever lived. And what that does is it gives us the luxury to actually to look at the problems we have in our soul, because we're not, you certainly start getting distracted from that when it's just a matter of eating or you've got problems in the body. So I think we've entered a new phase. So in one way, that's why I said it's both. I do think we've entered a new phase, which we're now paying more attention to this, and that's a good thing. And now we have to find out, actually, how are we living? And one of the things I think underlying it, and there's a huge, I mean, everyone's individual. I don't want to say things which are stupid, but I do think that we get infected by the zeitgeist, the way that our culture is thinking. And in Western Europe, Britain in particular, the dominant philosophy of the mainstream, not necessarily everyday people, but the mainstream that infects us all, is scientific materialism. And while science is fantastic, scientific materialism is bleak, because what it's going is, look, you live in a universe, it's completely random, exists for no reason, you're here long enough to go, what the hell, and you're gone. And that's it. So if that's true, and that's the general consensus of people we look up to and look clever, then the best thing you can do is not look, because if you look, it's going to be terrifying. So the biggest thing you can do is get distracted by anything. Just find something to distract you. And what that means is that you're doing that, and underneath this anxiety is building, this existential anxiety about the nature of life, and of course about the nature of death. Because now the mainstream is, there's a view, I think, of that if you think there's life after death, you're just not up to, you're just an intellectual softy. You haven't got the guts to look it in the face and go, no, that's nonsense, obviously. Because the view that we have just dismisses that. So part of what I want to do in my book Soul Story is articulate an intellectually robust alternative that enables me and those that resonate with it to stand up and go, no, it is perfectly intellectually respectable, and it can be based on the findings of science and corporate science to say the soul is immortal. And I think that, those sort of ideas, and that life has purpose and meaning. And I can go into why I think it's immortal and what the purpose and meaning is if you want, but that I think will help us to deal with this. And I think the problem you're articulating is going to push us into that. I mean, for instance, I think the huge growth of mindfulness, which is actually a great thing, but meditation and healing has come because people are having these problems, and it helps. So it's becoming popular.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the idea of problems in your soul rather than mental health. I really love that. Thank you. I shall take that with me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Who else?
Terry has a question on the post for you.
Terry. Come on in, Terry.
Here we go. Would love to hear more about what the purpose and meaning is. Where's Terry?
You mentioned about...
hello, Terry.
Hi, Tim. That you would be happy to talk more about this idea of purpose and meaning. So I'd love for you to chat about that.
Yes. Well, here's my suggestion, is that the universe doesn't so much have a purpose, is that its purpose is integral to what it is. So what it is the realization of potentiality. That's what it is. It is a process by which potentiality is constantly being realized in more and more emergent ways. So the purpose is built into it. So if that's what the whole universe has been doing, and you and I are at the leading edge of that process right now, then it seems to me that our purpose is to realize our most emergent, deepest potentials. And what that means is finding what it is in our unique soul that we can bring out and bring to the world. What is it? The soul is the imagination. What is it we can imagine and then bring into life? And each one of us is, I think it is doing that. You find something beautiful in the imagination, and then you bring it to life. And you may succeed, you may not. It doesn't really matter. In the process, you'll be thrown up and down and in and out, and you will form your soul. And that's what we need to do. And that's why it's great that we can really look. What is the most emergent thing that Tim or Terry can do? What's the deepest potential we can bring to this? And one of the deepest ones that's true for all of us is to wake up to this oneness and bring this love in. That's a universal one. And then there'll be unique things about Tim. So Tim writes books, so he can do that. And, you do what you do, and everyone does what they do. And then each one of us will fall in love with a different beautiful idea. And then bring that in, so that so that purpose has itself evolved as the underlying process has emerged onto greater and greater levels, and now we've arrived at the imagination. It's in, it is in the imagination and about articulating the most beautiful things that we can imagine. Does that make sense?
Yes, words are always so insufficient to explain these things. So there's so much meaning packed in, our own personal meaning on those words. So yeah, I love what you're talking about. And
one of the, sorry.
More thought. Oh, it's just
one of the
rings is true.
One of the little, I mean, I haven't gone into immortality in any great depth, and I know it's a really big subject. So I hope to do that. But what I'm suggesting is that the realm that's traditionally seen as eternal, what we call in the West heaven, the experience that people experience after death, the reports we have, literally hundreds of thousands of them now, of near-death experiences, they all sound like dreams, because in a sense they are. They're experiences of bardos, of this duat, of the dreaming, all these different names we give to it. But it's essentially the imagination. We're in it already. We can just go deeper and deeper into it. I just did ayahuasca for the first time in 20 years last weekend, and you go really deep into it. For instance, there's a whole shamanic practices will take you into it, all sorts of meditation. So what I'm saying, and which is kind of, if I say it like this, I like it because it's kind of cheeky, but it captures it, which is I'm saying that heaven has evolved. And that actually, if you study what people have said about what happens after death, you can see it evolving. That it starts with the Greeks and those cultures as something quite shadowy, hardly in existence. It becomes then richer, steadily richer. You get projections of everyday life, like the drinking halls of Valhalla and that sort of thing, because it's the imagination. That's what it is. We're creating a world of images, of imagination. And then when the big religions hit, we get places full of Buddhas and then full of saints, depending on where you are. Because we're creating a world of the imagination, of images, which now exists in its own right. And then with near-death experiences, you just get everything. I mean, now it's just like cities and flying horses, and anything you want is available because the imagination is so rich. So there's two things from that. One is it really enables me to nail down the question about life after death really simply and go, look, what we're asking when we say, is it possible there could be life after death, is what we're saying is, I think, that experience you're having right now of the imagination, and the experience that you go off into dreams, and you just whole worlds exist. That when this experience you're having of sensation of the body, when that stops, does that stop, or could that continue? And I think that's and for various reasons I have come to the conclusion it continues. And the other little thing which relates it back to what we were saying, Terry, which is what made me want to share it, is you end up with this lovely idea, which is every time one of us goes out into the imagination, into heaven, and sees a beautiful idea and brings it into the world, we bring a little bit of heaven to earth. And people have been doing that, which is why we now live in a much better situation than our ancestors. We have so much to be grateful for, more than we can possibly say. To be sitting here in this incredible culture we now live in, talking on the internet or around the world, well-fed, warm, able to travel, just read any book we want. I mean, just extraordinary. And each one of those things, every single one, this microphone, this Zoom, the computer, everything, the room, has been somebody's good idea, which they brought into reality and made this a little bit more heavenly. And I think that speaks to purpose in a very deep way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Terry. So we've got time. Chris.
There are some mysteries, Chris, which are beyond the ken of philosophy. I don't know. Depends. Are they winning tonight, I wonder?
Let's get the really important things sorted. Yeah.
Hi. Can I actually ask a question?
Yeah.
So this thing of evolving, and so you talked about before evolving, there was just this potential. And there's this, the nature seems to be evolution. So what did potential evolve from? Or is that?
No, that's a great question. I think these crazy questions are what I spend my life with. So this is where this is massive speculation, of course. But let me just clarify what I'm saying with that. What I'm saying is, when we say what was before the Big Bang, one of the things which I think we can safely say is that whatever the universe is coming from, it is the potential for the universe, because the universe has come from it. So calling it potentiality is a kind of safe thing to say, which I feel like even science has to go with. But I'm not saying it was at the beginning. I'm saying it's here right now. It's always here. That this moment is the meeting of that potentiality and all of the past. Every moment is. So that the potential is the future. It's the unknown. It's what hasn't manifested yet. So there's the accumulation of everything which has come into form, meeting the potentiality for everything that could be. And that's happened 13.8 billion years ago, but not just then. It's happened in every moment since, and it's happening now. Now, the specific thing you asked was, well, what's before the Big Bang? And my own hunch, and it can be no more than that, obviously, like most of what I'm saying, really, I know it's just like the best guess, is that this is not the first universe. I really am attracted to ideas like Roger Penrose, the mathematician and physicist in the UK, has explored that universes give birth to other universes, and that's what's happening with black holes. Now, I don't understand the physics well enough to evaluate that, but intuitively, the idea of universes giving birth to universes makes sense, because that's kind of what I see happening generally. Things give birth to other things, which would mean then that this universe is already reenacting the past of other universes, in much the same way that when you were born, you started off as just a few cells, and if you were watching, you go like, oh my God, it's just this. It's actually turning. It's an embryo. It's turned into an embryo. What are the chances of that? It's like, oh, and it's going somewhere. Now, that doesn't mean it will reach there. It doesn't mean that all sorts of things won't happen. It just means it's reenacting the past, because the past is present. So we're constantly reenacting the past. In fact, you could see everything as that. One of the ideas I love from Rupert Sheldrake, the biologist, is the idea that we should stop talking about the laws of nature and just talk about the habits of nature. So the past accumulates and it gets into a habit, and it's got into the habit of gravity. And that's a habit it's probably never going to break now. And I'm like that. I've got into the habit of being Tim. I can change it more easily than gravity, but everything is repeating the past. So one of the great mysteries of our particular universe is what's called the anthropic effect, which is that the particulars of the early forces that arise in the universe are so finely tuned that if they were even slightly different, then the universe would not have formed as it had, and it'd be impossible for there to be life. So there's a sense which people have of, oh my God, it's almost like it's set up for us. And there's lots of solutions to that. The multiverse is one solution, which I don't particularly like, which is like, no, it's all meaningless. There's just infinite meaningless universes, and this is just the one that worked. So I don't like that so much. But I think what makes more sense is that what I would call a genealogical universe, that there's been a universe before this one, and that this one is like giving birth to another process, which has already happened. Who knows? But there's something about that resonates. So that there is no beginning. So there's always the past and the possible. I mean, that's also blows your mind, but that works better for me. There's always the past and there's always the possible. That's what the moment is. It's always the paralogical meeting of the two. And it didn't start 13.8 billion years ago. That's just started for us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
My pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, Mick.
Mick.
You've got time for one more.
Got time for one more, yeah.
Much time as you want, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm curious. You know, I know a little bit about your history.
No, don't go there, please. These people think I'm. Don't tell them all those stories, for God's sake.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch myself out on that one. Have you spoken much with scientists, and what is their response?
Well, I have. And the scientists that I have spent time with, the response has been fantastic. However, the scientists that I'm meeting tend to be more open-minded scientists. So gatherings like the Science and Non-Duality Conference, I'm meeting people like Bruce Demmer, who ended up talking about my book in his presentation, which was a great honor. Brian Swimmer, who I mentioned, and various others who are also looking, I think, for an alternative and are intrigued by this. I've just come back from meeting Ian McGilchrist in the Isle of Skye, who is a expert on the brain and the left and right hemispheres of the brain. He wrote The Master and His Emissary, which was a huge book on the left and the right side of the brain. And he just sent me the lovely review, which has been beautiful because he's got very excited by it too. So that's good. However, I spent an awful lot of time trying to form this in a way that could reach out to science. But because of the milieu that I move in, I'm meeting much more people who are involved in spirituality than people in science. So I have much more, in terms of the people disagreeing with me, which I'm always up for, I probably meet more people who disagree from a spiritual point of view, who go, no, you know, it's not like that. It was all created by God, or there was a great consciousness and it created everything, or you know, all the traditional theories of spirituality. I get much more resistance from that than I do from science, probably because I'm not reaching through enough. As you know, hopefully I can increase that. But it's been good. I mean, it's been, you know, where it has happened, it's been good.
No, it's just that there's something about your evolution. Sounds like you're getting more, you know, interested in conversing with the scientific community.
Yeah, well, I think, yes. I mean, because as you well know, I mean, my interest has been very much in awakening, and I think what's happened over the last 10 years particularly is that I wanted to engage with where the mainstream of society is. Also, I think something's changed. I noticed it. One of the things which led to this book, and I don't know whether you folks have had this happen for you and your friends, but at a certain point, maybe 5-10 years ago, I started noticing that this, what I call the zeitgeist of this scientific materialism, was sinking into me and my friends. That people I knew had profound spiritual experiences were beginning to get not contaminated, well, kind of, or infected by this idea that actually, deep down, the rational response was life is random and meaningless, and if you're going to really, you know, let go of your wishful thinking, that's what you'd say. So I started noticing this creeping in, and because when I'm at my most awake, it feels like that the most real thing, because when I'm most awake, the things which arise for me are so powerful, and yet when I say them, they sound so naive and so childlike. So I wanted to shore them up. So there's a little bit in the book towards the end where I make a confession, which I'll make to you all now straight away, which is that in a way, I've created this huge philosophical vision to try and shore up intellectually in a way that satisfies me and hopefully others, things which are in essence extremely childlike but seem incredibly important and real. And the phrase I use in the book is that what arises in the deep awake state is this utter conviction that despite all the suffering and despite all of that, fundamentally life is good, that death is safe, and that what really, really matters is love. But that just sounds like, on itself, it sounds like, yeah, life is good, death is safe. What really matters is love. And yet for me, that's like, no, that's it. Now, what this philosophy does is it goes, no, that really is it. Because life is good, because it's evolving constantly towards the good. It's also shit, but that's because of where it's evolved from, and we have to live with that. But it's reaching always further, and it's fundamentally good. And death is safe, because we've now evolved to the point where the soul is not touched by the death of the body. And love is what really matters, because as you wake up to the fundamental oneness, that's love. And that's the most emergent level which we are reaching. And it's defined by love, like connection, this huge, big, all-embracing love. And that's enabled me to go, no, I can say this without feeling like I'm just talking nonsense, woo-woo. So that's what's happened to me, I think, Mick. That's been the journey.
I am so glad I asked a random question which got there. Or you took it there. Thank you.
Me too.
That's brilliant. And we haven't got to everybody's question. And Sarah's saying, can we have another Zoom call with Tim? We've been talking a lot about, in this community, we've been talking a lot recently about free will, and and Jill's asked, what's the best use of the psyche if not being in the moment? Do you reckon you can do that in 10 seconds, Tim?
I might need a minute, but yes, I can give it a go.
Okay.
Look, what do people mean by being in the moment? They really mean wake up to what's in front of you, and that's great. It's just what's in front of you is just much more than just the now, in the sense of that narrow. So it's really going, look, wake up to your senses, wake up to your mind as well, wake up to all of it. Just be more conscious. And the psyche is that process of imagination, which is where our choices are. I mean, God, it's everything to us. Its purpose it's what we are. It's where we choose what next. It's where we find meaning for everything. And the mindfulness, really, in its deepest sense, in the original sense that you find in Buddhism, is about the mindfulness is actually come back into your being and see it from there.
Yeah.
And that's just as powerful as ever. It's like, yeah, because that's where the oneness is. Come back into your being and see it from there.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant.
Before you pull things together, can I just say, folks, it's been a real pleasure to be with you. It's always a privilege to share these ideas. There's videos and stuff on my website, timfreke.com, loads of them about this, if you want to check it out and interested. And the thing that Kim was talking about, and Mick's invited me, I've done one in Greece with him, is these deep awakening retreats. And if that appeals to you about experiencing this deep awake state for yourself, feeling the big love for yourself, and exploring these ideas in an experiential way, then I've got one of those coming up in Bristol on the 29th of June to the 1st of July. And we still have a few places. It's in a beautiful residential. It's where Kim came to, in fact, and it's stunning. And if you happen to live in London, I'm coming to give an evening in London and before and after that in Bristol. So have a rummage around my website if you're intrigued, and if you want to be kept in touch, join my newsletter. And I'm very happy to share these ideas with you in every way I can.
Brilliant. Tim, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to post the recording in my groups and also put a link to your website there. So
great.
Thanks everybody for coming. And oh yes, we're all muted, but yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Tim.
Nice to see you, Mick. Thank you, Kim. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Merci.